Alpha paid Omega to clean his den, but when he followed her home, he found 4 pups crying alone. The bloodstains wouldn't come out. Marcus Thorne stood in the center of his den, watching crimson streaks mar the stone walls like abstract art painted in violence. 3 weeks had passed since the last challenge to his territory, 3 weeks since he'd torn apart the rival pack that dared cross into Colorado's Rockwood Canyon. The metallic scent still clung to everything, a constant reminder that being alpha meant your home doubled as a battlefield. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration building in his chest. At 32, Marcus commanded the largest werewolf pack in the Western Territories, but somehow he couldn't manage to find someone willing to clean up after his victories. The last 5 cleaning services had taken one look at the unusual stains and promptly declined the job. Humans had weak stomachs. The sound of gravel crunching under tires drew his attention to the window. Through the thick pines surrounding his mountain cabin, he spotted a beaten-up Honda Civic making its way up the winding drive. The cleaning service had promised to send someone today, their most discreet employee, whatever that meant. Marcus straightened, his wolf stirring beneath his skin. He'd learned long ago that showing weakness, even to hired help, could be deadly. Alphas didn't apologize for what they were. A soft knock echoed through the cabin, 3 gentle taps, almost hesitant. "It's open," he called, not bothering to move from his position. The door creaked and she stepped inside. Marcus had expected another jittery human who'd make excuses and leave within the hour. Instead, a young woman entered, maybe 25, with honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore faded jeans and a simple gray t-shirt, carrying a bucket of cleaning supplies that looked older than she did. But it wasn't her appearance that made his wolf go absolutely still. It was the way she moved. Careful, calculated, like someone who understood the weight of stepping into a predator's territory. "Mr. Thorne." Her voice was softer than he'd expected, but steady. "I'm Sarah Chun from Alpine Cleaning Services." Chin. The name didn't match her appearance, but Marcus had learned not to make assumptions about bloodlines. In their world, families scattered like leaves in a storm, picking up new names and new lives wherever they landed. "You're late," he said, testing her. "Actually, I'm 3 minutes early." She checked a worn watch on her wrist. "But I spent some time in my car, working up the courage to knock." Honesty. That was unexpected. Sarah stepped further into the room, and that's when it hit him, her scent. It should have been simple: human sweat, cheap detergent, maybe fear. Instead, something else whispered beneath the surface, something that made his inner wolf pace like a caged animal. "The agency said you had some challenging stains," she continued, her gray eyes taking in the blood-splattered walls without flinching. They weren't kidding. Most humans would have run by now. Hell, most werewolves would have submitted immediately in the presence of an alpha this powerful. But Sarah Chun just set down her bucket and surveyed the damage like a general planning a battle. "You're not afraid," Marcus observed, moving closer. He caught the subtle way her shoulders tensed, but she didn't retreat. "Fear doesn't pay the bills," she replied, pulling rubber gloves from her bucket. "Besides, I've seen worse. Worse than this." He gestured to a particularly dramatic spray pattern across the stone fireplace. Something flickered across her face. Memory maybe, or pain. "Blood's just blood, Mr. Thorne. It all comes out the same way if you know what you're doing." There was a story there. Marcus could sense it in the way she avoided his direct gaze, in the practiced efficiency of her movements as she began organizing her supplies. Most people her age working minimum-wage cleaning jobs were saving for college or supporting expensive habits. But Sarah moved with the desperate precision of someone carrying heavier burdens. "You'll work alone," he said, settling into a leather chair that gave him a clear view of the room. "I have calls to make." Of course, she'd already started mixing solutions, her hands steady despite his looming presence. "This will take several hours. I hope that's acceptable." Marcus pulled out his phone, but found himself watching her instead of checking messages. She worked methodically, starting with the worst stains and gradually moving outward. There was something almost ritualistic about her technique, not the rushed efficiency of most cleaners, but the careful attention of someone who understood that some messes carried weight beyond their physical presence. An hour passed, then two. Marcus abandoned all pretense of working and simply observed. Sarah-chan cleaned blood like she was erasing memories, like she understood exactly what these stains represented. No questions about what had happened here. No nervous chatter about the unusual circumstances. Just quiet, determined work. "You've done this before," he said finally. She paused, cloth halfway to the wall. "Cleaned blood. Cleaned up after people like me." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. When Sarah finally resumed scrubbing, her voice came out carefully neutral. "I clean what needs cleaning. That's all." But Marcus had excellent hearing, and beneath her calm words, he caught something else. A tremor that spoke of secrets and survival, of a woman who'd learned to navigate dangerous waters without making waves. His wolf stirred again, recognizing something it couldn't quite name. Whatever Sarah-chan was hiding, it was bigger than a simple cleaning job. And Marcus Thorne had always been a hunter at heart. By the fourth hour, Marcus couldn't focus on anything except the way Sarah moved through his space. She'd worked her way from the main room into his kitchen, then the hallway, erasing every trace of violence with methodical precision. But with each step she took deeper into his den, that strange scent grew stronger. It wrapped around his senses like smoke, stirring something buried deep in his memory, something that made his wolf pace restlessly beneath his skin. Marcus set down his phone, abandoning his third attempt to read the same email. The pull in his chest had grown from curiosity to something dangerously close to obsession. He found himself tracking her movements by sound alone, the soft splash of water in her bucket, the gentle scrub of cloth against stone, the whisper of her breath as she worked. She was an omega. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He should have recognized it immediately, the way she'd entered his territory without triggering his dominance instincts, the careful submission in her posture that wasn't quite fear. But omegas were rare, especially ones who worked alone. They usually stayed within pack protection, too valuable and vulnerable to risk exposure to unknown alphas. Yet here she was, cleaning his den like it was the most natural thing in the world. Marcus rose from his chair, following the sound of her movements to the back hallway. He found her kneeling beside a particularly stubborn stain near his bedroom door. Her sleeves rolled up to reveal surprisingly strong forearms. Blonde strands had escaped her ponytail, framing her face as she worked. "You're Omega," he said quietly. Sarah's hand stilled for just a moment before resuming its steady rhythm. "Does that change the price?" "It changes everything." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, close enough now that her scent filled his lungs completely. "Omegas don't work alone. Where's your pack?" "Don't have one." The simple words hit like a sledgehammer. Packless omegas rarely survived long. They were too vulnerable, too sought after by alphas looking to strengthen their bloodlines. The fact that Sarah was here, alive and independent, meant she was either incredibly strong or incredibly lucky. Or she was hiding something much bigger than he'd imagined. "That's impossible," Marcus said. "A lot of impossible things happen when you're good at staying invisible." Sarah sat back on her heels, finally meeting his gaze. "Is this going to be a problem, Mr. Thorne?" Her gray eyes held steady, but Marcus caught the slight tremor in her hands as she gripped the cleaning cloth. She was afraid, not of him specifically, but of discovery, of what being seen truly meant. "Why are you here?" he asked. "In my territory in Colorado. This isn't exactly a safe place for someone like you." "Someone like me?" There was an edge to her voice now, sharp enough to cut. "Alone." Unprotected. Marcus took a step closer and watched her fight the instinct to retreat. There are alphas in these mountains who would claim you without a second thought. Let them try. The words came out fiercer than she probably intended, and Marcus caught something else in her scent. Not just omega sweetness but steel underneath. Survivors learn to develop claws. But beneath even that, something familiar tugged at his memory. A warmth that felt like coming home after a long hunt, like pack bonds and shared blood. It was impossible, but Marcus could have sworn he'd encountered this scent before. "What's your last name again?" he asked suddenly. Chun, the answer came too quickly. "Your real last name." Sarah stood slowly, gathering her supplies with deliberate calm. "I think we're done here, Mr. Thorne. The den's clean." She was right. The bloodstains had vanished completely, leaving his space pristine. But Marcus barely noticed. His wolf was practically clawing at his chest now, recognition dancing just beyond reach. That scent, that careful way she moved, the stubborn tilt of her chin when challenged, it all pointed to something his rational mind refused to accept. $200, he said, pulling cash from his wallet, plus a $50 tip. Sarah took the money without counting it, tucking the bills into her back pocket. "Thank you." She headed for the door, and Marcus knew he should let her go. Should forget about the mysterious Omega who cleaned blood like a professional and carried secrets in her scent. But as she reached for the door handle, memory finally clicked into place. Moonlight through pine trees. A woman running through the forest, children clutched against her chest. The desperate howl that had echoed through the canyon 15 years ago, when his father's council had voted for exile. The Whitmore bloodline, banished for crimes that predated Marcus's birth, their alpha stripped of rank and cast out to die in the wilderness. The council had decreed that any Whitmore blood found in their territory would be killed on sight, an old law, brutal and absolute. But the woman fleeing through the trees that night had carried the same scent now filling his den. Wild honey and pine smoke, with an undertone of something that called to pack bonds buried so deep they felt like instinct. "Sarah," he called as she opened the door. She paused but didn't turn around. "Be careful out there. These mountains aren't safe after dark." A soft laugh escaped her throat, bitter and knowing. "Nothing's safe after dark, Mr. Thorne. That's why I learned to clean up messes." The door closed behind her with a quiet click, leaving Marcus alone with the scent of pine smoke and the growing certainty that everything he thought he knew about his territory was about to change. His wolf wanted to follow her. Every instinct screamed to track her through the forest, to uncover whatever truth she was hiding. But Marcus forced himself to stay put, watching through the window as her ancient Honda disappeared down the mountain road. If she really was Whitmore blood, following her could mean signing her death warrant. But not following her might mean something much worse. The rational part of Marcus's mind held out for exactly 27 minutes. He sat in his leather chair, staring at the spot where bloodstains had been, trying to convince himself that Sarah Chun was just another Omega trying to survive in a dangerous world. That the familiar scent meant nothing. That 15-year-old memories could play tricks on even the sharpest werewolf senses. But his wolf wasn't buying it. The restlessness built until Marcus couldn't sit still another second. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, telling himself he was just going for a run through his territory. Normal alpha behavior. Nothing to do with honey blonde hair and gray eyes that held too many secrets. The lie lasted until he caught her scent trail on the mountain road. Marcus shifted into his wolf form behind a stand of pines, his dark fur blending with the evening shadows. Sarah's Honda had turned off the main road about 2 miles down, following a barely visible dirt track that wound deeper into the forest. Most humans would have missed the turnoff entirely, but Sarah had navigated it like she'd driven the route 1,000 times. He followed the scent through thick underbrush, moving silent as smoke between the trees. The trail led him down a steep ravine, past a creek that should have washed away any lingering traces of her presence. But Omega scent was stronger than human scent, and this particular Omega signature seemed burned into his senses now. After nearly an hour of careful tracking, Marcus crested a small ridge and looked down into a hidden valley he'd never bothered to explore. What he saw made his wolf freeze mid-step. A tiny cabin sat tucked between towering pines, so old and weathered it looked like it had grown from the forest floor itself. Smoke drifted from a crooked chimney, and Sarah's Honda was parked beside a stack of firewood that had seen better decades. But it wasn't the humble shelter that stopped Marcus cold. It was the sound. Crying. High-pitched, desperate wails that cut through the mountain air like knife blades. Not human cries, something deeper, more primal. The kind of sound that triggered every protective instinct an alpha possessed. Pup cries. Marcus crept closer, his wolf senses screaming alerts. The scent hit him first. Milk and fear and something unmistakably young. For distinct signatures, all weak from hunger and exhaustion. His rational mind tried to explain it away. Maybe Sarah was helping a neighbor. Maybe she'd found abandoned human babies, but his wolf knew better. These were werewolf pups, and they were alone. He reached the edge of the clearing just as the cabin door opened, but instead of Sarah, a child appeared, maybe 5 years old, with dark hair and serious brown eyes. The boy looked around the empty yard with the careful attention of someone much older, then disappeared back inside. A moment later, the crying quieted to soft whimpers. Marcus settled into the underbrush to wait, every nerve on high alert. Where was Sarah? Why were pups this young left unattended? In his pack, children were never alone. There were always adults nearby, always protection, always. The snap of breaking twigs announced Sarah's return before he saw her. She emerged from the opposite tree-line carrying a canvas bag that bulged with supplies. Even from 50 yards away, Marcus could see the exhaustion in her shoulders, the careful way she moved like every step hurt. She'd been hunting, or more accurately, scavenging, probably raiding garbage bins behind restaurants, looking for anything edible enough to feed for hungry mouths. The cabin door flew open as soon as Sarah stepped into the clearing. 4 children tumbled out, the oldest maybe 7, the youngest barely walking. They surrounded her with desperate relief, small hands clutching at her clothes as she knelt to gather them close. I know, Sarah murmured, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. Mama's here. I found food. Marcus's world tilted sideways. These weren't just any pups. As the evening breeze shifted, carrying their scent directly to his hiding spot, recognition hit like a physical blow. Beneath the hunger and fear, beneath Sarah's Omega signature that had been masking them, lay something impossible. Thornpack scent. These children carried the bloodline of his family. Not distant cousins or half-forgotten connections. These pups smelled like his own brother's children. Like his sister's twins. Like pack bonds forged in blood and protected by law. But that was impossible. His pack kept meticulous records. Every birth was registered, every bloodline tracked. There were no missing children, no unaccounted offspring. The thorn line was carefully controlled, their genetics too valuable to risk through careless breeding. Yet here were 4 pups who should have been living in the pack den, surrounded by protection and plenty, instead hiding in the wilderness with a packless Omega who fed them from garbage bags. Marcus watched Sarah divide what looked like day-old bread and cold French fries among the children, her own share noticeably smaller than theirs. The oldest boy, the one who'd checked the yard earlier, took charge of the youngest, helping her eat while Sarah murmured reassurances. Tomorrow will be better, she promised, smoothing the little girl's dark hair. Mama's got another job lined up. We'll have enough for groceries soon. Another job. Marcus realized with growing horror that cleaning his den hadn't been Sarah's only work today. It had been one stop in a desperate daily hunt for enough money to keep these children fed. The youngest pup, a girl maybe 3 years old, looked up at Sarah with enormous blue eyes. Hungry still, Mama? I know, baby. Just a little more bread, okay? We have to make it last. Marcus's wolf was vibrating with the need to act, to provide, to protect. These children carried his blood, his pack's legacy, and they were starving 50 miles from a den filled with more food than they could eat in a lifetime. But moving would mean revealing himself. And if Sarah really was Whitmore blood hiding Thorn pups, approaching could trigger a chain of events that would destroy them all. The council's laws were absolute. Exile was permanent, and harboring exiled bloodlines meant death. Even for an alpha. Even for children who shared his blood. Marcus forced himself to remain hidden as Sarah gathered her babies inside for the night, but his mind was already racing through possibilities and consequences. Whatever had brought these pups into Sarah's care, whatever secret connected them to his pack, one thing was brutally clear. Everything he thought he knew about his family's history was a lie. And 4 innocent lives hung in the balance of what he chose to do about it. Marcus waited until dawn. He'd spent the night in wolf form, circling the cabin's perimeter while wrestling with decisions that could destroy everything he'd built. By the time pale sunlight filtered through the pines, he'd made his choice. The questions burning in his chest wouldn't be silenced by distance or time. He needed answers. Sarah emerged from the cabin just after sunrise, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to start each day in survival mode. She was gathering kindling when Marcus stepped from the tree-lean in human form, his hands visible and empty. She spun toward him with inhuman speed, placing herself between his position and the cabin door. Her eyes flashed gold for just a moment, wolf instincts taking over before she forced them back down. "Stay away from them," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but Marcus caught the tremor underneath. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "You can't be here. If anyone sees you." "The children," Marcus interrupted. "They're Thorn blood." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her face went white, then gray, and for a moment Marcus thought she might collapse. Instead, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin with the defiance of someone who'd been cornered too many times to show weakness. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Their scent doesn't lie." Marcus took a careful step closer. "Those pups carry my pack's bloodline. I want to know how." Sarah's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Your pack's bloodline. Right. Like the mighty Thorns would ever acknowledge what they threw away." The admission hung between them like a confession. Marcus felt his wolf go perfectly still, the way it did before a hunt turned deadly. "Tell me," he said simply. For a long moment, Sarah stared at him with eyes that held too much pain for someone her age. Then she seemed to deflate, the fight going out of her as if she'd finally run out of places to run. "My name isn't Sarah Chan," she said quietly. "It's Sarah Whitmore. And you already know what that means." Marcus had suspected, but hearing the confirmation still hit like ice water. "The exiled bloodline. Exiled for crimes we didn't commit. Banished for refusing to bow to your grandfather's war games." Sarah's voice grew harder. "My great-grandfather wouldn't send Whitmore wolves to die in territorial disputes that had nothing to do with us. So the council declared us traitors and cast us out. That was 60 years ago. Exile doesn't have an expiration date." Sarah kicked at the dirt with worn boots. 3 generations of my family have lived as ghosts because of your pack's judgment." Marcus processed this, pieces of old pack history shifting into new configurations. "But the children are my children." The fierceness in Sarah's voice could have cut steel. "Mine to protect and raise and love, no matter what blood they carry." "Whose blood, Sarah? Who's their father?" The question seemed to break something inside her. Sarah's shoulders sagged, and when she looked up at Marcus, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "David Thorn," she whispered. "Your cousin David." Marcus's world tilted sideways. David, his father's nephew, the pack's most promising tracker, who disappeared during a routine patrol 5 years ago. They'd assumed he'd been killed by rivals or taken by hunters. The pack had mourned him as a hero. "David's alive." Was Sarah's voice cracked? He found me 3 years after I came to Colorado. I was living rough, trying to stay invisible, barely surviving. But David, he said he'd been tracking Whitmore blood for months, determined to learn the truth about the exile. Marcus could picture it. David had always been too curious for his own good, too willing to question pack law when it didn't make sense. He found out the council lied, Sarah continued. The Whitmores weren't traitors. We were scapegoats. Your grandfather needed someone to blame for his own failures, and exiled bloodlines can't defend themselves. The implications hit Marcus like a landslide. If the exile was built on lies, then everything the council had done since, including the kill-on-sight order for Whitmore blood, was built on a foundation of deception. David mated with you, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. He claimed me, protected me, gave me 4 beautiful children and 3 years of feeling safe. Tears were flowing freely now. And then your pack found out. Marcus's throat closed. What happened? They sent hunters. 6 of them, led by your Uncle Robert. Sarah's voice turned hollow. David fought them in wolf form while I ran with the babies. I heard him die from 2 miles away, heard his howl cut short. The image burned itself into Marcus's mind. His cousin, outnumbered and desperate, dying to protect an exiled Omega and children who should have been welcomed into the pack instead of hunted like criminals. I've been running ever since, Sarah continued. Changing names, moving constantly, taking whatever work I could find. Always looking over my shoulder. Always terrified that someone would recognize their scent and finish what the hunters started. Marcus stared at the cabin where 4 innocent children slept. Children who carried his blood and his family's legacy. Children who should have been raised as princes and princesses of the pack, instead of living in poverty and fear. You cleaned my den, he said slowly, knowing who I was. I needed the money. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And I thought, I hoped maybe you were different from the others. That you might actually care about justice instead of just power. She looked at him then with desperate hope warring against learned helplessness. Was I wrong? Marcus thought about pack law, about council traditions, about the weight of alpha leadership that had shaped every decision he'd made for the past decade. Then he thought about David's children crying from hunger while his own pack lived in abundance. Sarah, he said carefully, if I expose this truth to the council, what do you think will happen? Her face went ashen. They'll kill us all. The children, me, anyone connected to the Whitmore name. Exile wasn't enough. They need us dead to bury their secrets. Marcus nodded slowly. The political implications were staggering. If the pack learned their leaders had built power on lies and murdered innocent pack members, it could trigger a civil war. But looking at the fear in Sarah's eyes, at the cabin where David's children lived in hiding, Marcus realized the politics didn't matter. Some choices were bigger than pack law. Some truths were worth any price. Marcus spent 3 days in hell. He'd left Sarah's cabin with promises to return, but no clear plan beyond the growing certainty that everything had to change. Now he sat in his study, staring at pack records that painted a very different picture than the one burned into his memory. The official files were sanitized, clinical. David Thorne, killed in action during routine patrol. Cause of death, unknown predators. No mention of Whitmore blood. No record of children left behind. But Marcus had been through his Uncle Robert's private papers, and those told a darker story. Expenses for territorial cleanup, orders for bloodline containment, references to maintaining pack purity, that made Marcus's stomach turn. His pack, his family, had murdered David and tried to kill Sarah and 4 innocent children to cover up a 60-year-old lie. The worst part was how easily it all fit together. Robert had always been ruthless about pack security, always quick to cite tradition when justifying harsh measures. Marcus had assumed it came from strength. Now he wondered how much of his uncle's authority was built on buried secrets. A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Alpha. Elena Reeves, his beta and closest advisor, stepped into the study. She'd been his anchor since taking leadership 5 years ago. Smart, loyal, brutally honest when he needed it most. "You look like hell," she observed, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Feel worse." Marcus closed the files and met her dark eyes. "Elena, what would you do if you discovered everything we've built was founded on a lie?" Her eyebrows rose. "That's either a philosophical question, or you've found something that's about to blow up our world. Option 2. Elena leaned back, processing. "How big a lie are we talking about?" Marcus considered how much to reveal. Elena was Pack, blood sworn to follow his lead, but she was also council-raised. Her loyalty to tradition ran deep. "Big enough to change everything," he said finally. "And you're thinking about exposing it?" It wasn't a question. Elena had always been able to read him too well. "It's the right thing to do," Marcus said. "Maybe. But right and smart aren't always the same thing." Elena's voice was carefully neutral. "The pack needs stability, Marcus. We've got the Morrison territory dispute heating up, pressure from the Eastern alliances, and rumors that someone's been tracking our patrol routes. This isn't the time for internal upheaval." Marcus thought about Sarah's gray eyes, about children who flinched at unexpected sounds because they'd learned that strangers meant danger. What if the cost of stability is too high? Before Elena could answer, his phone buzzed with an urgent text. Then another. Within seconds, his screen was lighting up with messages from border patrols, all carrying variations of the same alarming news. Unknown wolves had been spotted in the territory. Multiple scents, moving in coordinated patterns. Not Morrison Pack, these signatures were unfamiliar, professional. "Hunters," Elena said grimly, reading over his shoulder. Marcus's blood went cold. Professional hunters meant one thing. Someone had put a bounty on Pack targets. But who and why now? His phone rang, Robert's contact flashing on the screen. "Answer it," Elena advised. "But carefully." Marcus accepted the call. "Uncle." "Marcus, we have a situation." Robert's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I've got reliable intel that Whitmore blood has been spotted in our territory. The council's unanimous, we move tonight." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "The abomination bloodline. Sources say there's a female with pups, hiding somewhere in the eastern quadrant. This ends now before it spreads." Marcus forced his voice to stay level. "Sources. Anonymous tip. Someone who knows our history and respects our laws." Robert's tone sharpened. "I'm mobilizing hunting parties as we speak. Time to finish what we started 5 years ago." The line went dead. Elena was watching Marcus with growing alarm. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Worse, Marcus was already grabbing his jacket. "I've seen the future, and it's about to go very badly." His mind raced through implications. Someone had discovered Sarah's location and tipped off the council. Whether it was revenge, politics, or simple hatred didn't matter. Hunting parties would be moving within hours, and they wouldn't stop to ask questions before killing. "Marcus, where are you going?" Elena called as he headed for the door. "To make a choice." "About what?" Marcus paused in the doorway, feeling the weight of everything he was about to risk. His position, his pack's stability, possibly his life. But in his mind he could hear 4 children laughing in a hidden cabin, could smell honey and pine smoke that felt like coming home. "About who I want to be," he said simply. The drive to Sarah's cabin took 30 minutes that felt like hours. Marcus pushed his truck through mountain roads that weren't meant for speed, his wolf clawing at his chest with urgency that bordered on panic. The scent hit him before he reached the clearing, fear thick and acrid. Sarah's terror was so strong it made his teeth ache. He found her loading the children into her ancient Honda, her movements sharp with desperation. She looked up as his truck emerged from the trees, and relief flooded her face for just a moment before she remembered who he was. "They're coming," she said without preamble. I can smell them on the wind, at least 6 wolves moving fast. Marcus checked his watch. The hunting parties were ahead of schedule. Sarah. He stepped out of the truck, and his wolf went absolutely still as recognition hit like lightning. The pull he'd felt in his den, the familiar warmth in her scent, it wasn't just pack memory. It was deeper, more primal. The kind of bond that transcended law and logic and choice. Fated mates. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. We need to go, Sarah said, lifting the youngest child into the car. Now. Marcus looked at the children, David's children, his blood, his responsibility, and made the choice that would define everything that came after. No, he said firmly. We're not running anymore. The hunters arrived like shadows given teeth. Marcus smelled them before he saw them. 6 wolves moving through the forest with deadly precision. Robert's scent led the pack, followed by 5 others Marcus recognized as the council's most ruthless enforcers. They'd surrounded the cabin in minutes, cutting off every escape route with military efficiency. Sarah, Marcus said quietly, not taking his eyes off the tree-line. Get the children behind me. Marcus, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He stepped forward as golden eyes began gleaming between the pines. I understand that my pack has been built on lies. I understand that my uncle murdered my cousin to hide those lies. And I understand that it ends tonight. The first wolf emerged from the trees in hybrid form. Half human, half beast, designed for maximum intimidation. Robert's voice rumbled through elongated jaws. Step aside, nephew. This doesn't concern you. Everything about my family concerns me. Marcus didn't shift, didn't show aggression. He simply stood between the hunters and the cabin, radiating the absolute authority of an alpha protecting his own. These children are thorn blood. They're under my protection. These abominations carry tainted bloodline. Another hunter circled left, trying to flank them. Council law demands. Council law was built on murder and deception. Marcus's voice cut through the night like a blade. David Thorne didn't die on patrol. You killed him for mating with Sarah Whitmore. You tried to kill her and 4 innocent children to cover up the council's lies. The admission hit the hunting party like a physical blow. Marcus saw uncertainty flicker in their eyes. They'd been told they were cleansing the territory of enemies, not executing pack members for loving the wrong bloodline. You have no proof, Robert snarled, but his confidence had cracked. I have your private files. Marcus pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. Every expense record, every order, every cover-up. I've already sent copies to Elena and the other betas. By morning, the entire pack will know what really happened to the Whitmore bloodline. Behind him, Marcus heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath. She hadn't known about his insurance policy. You've destroyed us, Robert said, his hybrid form bristling with rage. When the pack learns the truth, they'll tear themselves apart. 60 years of stability gone. Good. Marcus felt his own wolf rising, power flooding his system as his alpha nature asserted itself. Let them tear apart a system built on innocent blood. Let them build something better. Robert's howl of fury echoed through the canyon as he launched himself forward, claws extended. Marcus met him midair, shifting into his massive black wolf as they collided. They hit the ground in a tangle of teeth and claws, rolling through the dirt as the other hunters hesitated. Marcus was younger, stronger, and fighting for more than pack politics. He was fighting for his mate, for David's children, for the chance to rewrite a legacy stained with corruption. When Robert's jaws snapped toward his throat, Marcus twisted away and buried his teeth in his uncle's shoulder, tasting blood and victory. Enough! The command came from Sarah, but not as Marcus had ever heard her before. Her voice carried the authority of an alpha female, the power of an omega who'd finally stopped hiding what she was. The fighting wolves separated, both staring at her in shock. Sarah stood in the cabin doorway, her gray eyes blazing gold, no longer cowering or submitting. "I am Sarah Whitmore," she declared, her voice carrying to every hunter in the clearing. "Last daughter of the exiled bloodline, mate to David Thorne, mother to his children. And I claim sanctuary under the oldest law of our kind." Marcus's heart stopped. Sanctuary law, the ancient right of a wolf to demand protection for her young. It superseded all council authority, but only if claimed by an alpha's acknowledged mate. Every eye turned to Marcus. Robert's hybrid form was bleeding but defiant. The other hunters waited for their alpha's decision. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Marcus looked at Sarah. Brave, fierce, beautiful Sarah who'd survived exile and poverty, and the murder of her mate to protect 4 children who weren't even born hers. Then he looked at the cabin where David's kids waited, scared but safe under their adopted mother's protection. The choice wasn't hard. It never had been. "I claim you," Marcus said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "Sarah Whitmore, I claim you as my mate, your children as my own, your bloodline as restored to full pack standing." The words transformed everything. Marcus felt the fated bond snap into place like electricity, binding him to Sarah with ties deeper than law or tradition. He felt her pack signature merge with his, felt the children's scent shift to carry his protection. But more than that, he felt the weight of leadership settle into new patterns. Not the heavy burden of maintaining corrupt traditions, but the clean strength of protecting what mattered most. Robert's snarl of rage was cut short as Elena's howl echoed through the canyon. Marcus's beta had arrived with half the pack behind her, drawn by the emergency signals his phone messages had triggered. "Alpha," Elena said, shifting to human form as she took in the scene. "The Pack Council requests your immediate return. They've reviewed the files you sent." Marcus almost smiled. By claiming Sarah publicly and revealing the truth about David's murder, he'd forced his pack to choose between the old corrupt order and a new path forward. "Tell them," Marcus said, pulling Sarah against his side as the children emerged from the cabin, "that their alpha comes home with his family. All of his family." As dawn broke over the mountains, Marcus loaded David's children into his truck alongside their fierce adoptive mother. The hunting party had slunk away, their authority broken. The pack would either accept this new reality or face the consequences of rejecting their alpha's mate. But watching Sarah laugh as the youngest child tried to howl like a wolf, Marcus knew they'd made the right choice. Some bonds were stronger than politics. Some love was worth reshaping the world. And sometimes the best way to honor the past was to refuse to repeat its mistakes. The Whitmore bloodline was no longer exiled. They were home.